What happens when an elite warrior who just spent months risking his life in classified combat zones gets treated like a common criminal on his own soil? Meet Jordan Hale, an active-duty Navy SEAL who just wanted to rest in an airport lounge before his connecting flight home. But Officer Kevin Malone saw something else: a target. Driven by prejudice and an inflated badge, Malone initiated an illegal arrest that would trigger a devastating chain reaction. This isn't just a story of profiling, it's a masterclass in nuclear-level karma. Before the dust settled, careers would burn, a multi-million-dollar lawsuit would drop, and a bully would learn the ultimate lesson about picking the wrong target. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead inside Terminal D of Miami International Airport. The concourse was already a chaotic artery of screaming children, frantic business travelers, and the rolling thunder of suitcases on wheels. Walking through the center of it all, moving with a silent, measured grace that sharply contrasted the surrounding panic, was Chief Petty Officer Jordan Hale. Jordan was running on very little sleep, completely drained from a grueling deployment in a classified combat zone overseas. He was a veteran with over a decade of service in naval special warfare, a man whose body bore the invisible scars of carrying out operations the American public would never read about. Today, however, he wasn't a Tier 1 operator. He was just a deeply exhausted man trying to get back to his fiancée in San Diego. Dressed in a faded gray hoodie, well-worn dark denim jeans, and carrying a scuffed olive-drab tactical duffel bag, Jordan didn't look like a typical first-class passenger. He certainly didn't look like the wealthy executives and affluent tourists who usually occupied the terminal's exclusive spaces. But thanks to a grateful gate agent who had seen his military orders, Jordan had been bumped to a first-class seat and granted access to the airline's VIP lounge. He approached the frosted glass doors of the executive club. The air inside was instantly different, cool, tranquil, smelling faintly of roasted espresso and expensive leather. Soft acoustic jazz played from hidden speakers. At the front desk stood Megan Ellis, a young lounge attendant with a bright professional smile. "Good morning, sir. Boarding pass, please?" Megan asked gently. Jordan unzipped the top pocket of his bag, retrieved his digital pass on his phone, and scanned it. The machine chimed a pleasant ascending tone, flashing a bright green light. "Thank you, Mr. Hale. Your flight to San Diego boards from gate D22 in a few hours. Please enjoy the breakfast buffet and let me know if you need anything," Megan said, genuinely welcoming him. "Appreciate it," Jordan replied, his voice a low, gravelly baritone. He walked past the front desk and found a quiet corner near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the tarmac. He dropped his heavy duffel, sank into a plush leather armchair, and closed his eyes, letting the ambient quiet wash over him. From across the room, leaning against a mahogany pillar near the buffet line, Airport Police Officer Kevin Malone was watching. Malone had been on the airport police force for many years. He was a heavy-set man with a tightly clipped mustache and a reputation among his peers for being a hard charger. In reality, Malone was a profound cynic who viewed his badge not as a shield to protect, but as a hammer to wield. He prided himself on his gut instincts, a thinly veiled excuse for a deep-seated prejudice that had resulted in numerous complaints over the years. Unluckily for his victims, the police union had always managed to sweep Malone's excessive force and harassment grievances under the rug. Malone sipped his complimentary coffee, his eyes fixed on Jordan. To Malone's prejudiced mind, the sight of a black man in casual, slightly worn streetwear, lounging in an exclusive, high-paying executive club, was an anomaly that needed immediate correction. He didn't see an exhausted traveler. He saw someone who was out of place, someone who was likely trespassing, stealing food, or running a stolen credit card scam. "Look at this guy," Malone muttered under his breath, adjusting his heavy utility belt. He set his coffee cup down on a nearby table and began walking toward Jordan's corner. His heavy boots thudded softly against the premium carpeting. Jordan's eyes were closed, but his situational awareness was never truly off. He heard the distinct cadence of heavy footsteps approaching his flank. He opened his eyes just as Officer Malone stopped close by, deliberately invading Jordan's personal space. "Can I help you, officer?" Jordan asked calmly, leaning back in the chair. Malone crossed his arms, his hand resting conspicuously near his taser. "I think the question is, can I help you? You look a little lost, buddy." Jordan blinked, keeping his expression entirely neutral. "I'm not lost. I'm waiting for a flight." Is that right? Malone sneered, his eyes raking over Jordan's hoodie and jeans. Because this lounge is for first-class ticket holders and club members only. It's not a public waiting area for anyone who wanders in off the concourse. I'm aware of the policy, Jordan replied smoothly. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't shift his posture. I was cleared at the front desk. Malone's jaw tightened. He despised defiance, especially from people he had already decided were beneath him. Yeah, well, sometimes the girls up front get busy and miss things. Let me see your boarding pass. Jordan sighed internally. He was tired. His bones ached. He didn't want a confrontation, but he recognized the arrogant gleam in Malone's eyes. It was a look he had seen in petty warlords and corrupt officials halfway across the world. Without a word, Jordan reached into his pocket, unlocked his phone, and held up the screen displaying his first-class boarding pass. The bright green VIP lounge access banner was impossible to miss. Malone squinted at the screen. He hadn't expected Jordan to actually have a legitimate pass, but instead of apologizing and walking away, Malone's ego doubled down. He noticed the name on the pass. Jordan Hale, Malone read aloud. He looked back down at Jordan. Anyone can take a screenshot of somebody else's pass or buy one with a stolen card. I need to see your physical identification now. The atmosphere in the immediate vicinity began to chill. A few nearby passengers, previously engrossed in their laptops or newspapers, began to glance over. The quiet murmur of the lounge dropped. Jordan slowly lowered his phone. The training of a Navy SEAL isn't just about physical lethality. It's heavily focused on extreme emotional control under immense pressure. Where an average civilian might have panicked or shouted out of righteous indignation, Jordan's heart rate remained steady. "Officer," Jordan said, his voice deadly calm but echoing with quiet authority. "I scanned my pass at the desk. The system verified my identity. I'm a paying passenger and I haven't broken any laws. Am I being detained or am I free to go back to sleep?" The phrase, "am I being detained?" hit Malone like a spark to dry tinder. In his world, citizens didn't ask questions. They complied blindly. "Listen to me very carefully, boy," Malone growled, taking a half step forward so he was towering over the seated SEAL. The use of the word boy hung in the air, heavy and deliberate. "You are in a secure area of an international airport. If I ask for your ID, you produce it, or I lock you up for trespassing and failing to identify. Don't play constitutional lawyer with me." At the front desk, Megan Ellis had noticed the commotion. She quickly walked over, looking nervously between the imposing police officer and the quiet passenger. "Excuse me, officer," Megan interrupted, her voice trembling slightly. "Is there a problem? Mr. Hale was verified through our system just a few minutes ago. He's traveling on a military courtesy upgrade." Malone didn't even turn his head to look at her. "Step back, miss. This is police business now. This individual is refusing a lawful order. He's not causing any trouble." "I said step back," Malone snapped, his voice booming across the tranquil lounge. Several passengers gasped. Jordan looked at Megan and gave her a small, reassuring nod. "It's all right, ma'am. Thank you." Jordan turned his attention back to the red-faced officer. He knew exactly how this game was played. If he refused entirely, Malone would use it as an excuse for physical violence. Jordan slowly reached into his back pocket, pulling out his wallet. He extracted his green Common Access card, his Department of Defense military ID, and handed it to Malone. Malone snatched the card. He looked at the photo, then at Jordan, then back at the card. He tapped it against his knuckles. "Military, huh?" Malone mocked, his tone dripping with disbelief. "Chief Petty Officer, sure you are. You know how many stolen valor fakes we get coming through this airport? You don't look like any military chief I've ever seen. You look like a thug who stole a duffel bag." 2 tables away, a corporate attorney named Andrew Foster had seen and heard enough. Dressed in a sharp navy suit, Andrew quietly pulled out his smartphone, tapped the camera app, and hit record, resting the phone against his coffee cup to keep it steady. "Call my command if you want to verify it," Jordan said, his voice remaining terrifyingly level. "The number is on the back, or you can give me my ID back and walk away before you make a mistake you can't undo." That was it, the final blow to Malone's fragile, inflated ego. A suspect wasn't just talking back, he was issuing warnings. "Stand up," Malone ordered, his hand dropping to the heavy metal cuffs on his belt. Jordan didn't move. "For what charge, officer?" "Stand up right now, or I will drag you out of that chair and charge you with resisting arrest," Malone shouted, spit flying from his lips. Jordan calculated the variables in a fraction of a second. If Malone put hands on him, Jordan's muscle memory would instinctively react. He could incapacitate the overweight officer in seconds, but doing so would mean assaulting a police officer, ending his military career, and giving the system exactly what it wanted. The smartest tactical move was to surrender the battle to win the war. Slowly, deliberately, Jordan stood up. He stood 6'2", suddenly eye to eye with Malone, his broad shoulders and athletic build obvious even under the loose hoodie. For a brief second, a flicker of genuine physical intimidation flashed in Malone's eyes, but he masked it with aggressive bluster. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back," Malone commanded, unholstering his handcuffs. "I am complying," Jordan said loudly, ensuring the growing crowd of onlookers and Andrew Foster's camera captured his words clearly. "I am not resisting. I have provided my valid ticket and my federal ID. You are arresting me without probable cause or a stated charge." "Shut your mouth!" Malone grabbed Jordan's left wrist, twisting it roughly behind his back. Jordan let his arm go limp, offering zero resistance, though the rough handling sent a sharp flare of pain through a shoulder that had recently healed from a shrapnel graze. Click, click. The cold steel clamped down around Jordan's wrists. The sound was deafening in the suddenly silent lounge. Megan Ellis had her hands over her mouth in shock. Other passengers were staring in disbelief. Malone aggressively patted down Jordan's pockets, finding nothing but a cell phone and a wallet. He grabbed Jordan by the bicep, pushing him forward. "Let's go. You're going to the holding cells," Malone sneered, feeling a rush of triumphant power. He had won. He had forced the defiant man into submission. As Malone marched him toward the exit, Jordan turned his head slightly, looking over his shoulder directly into Malone's eyes. There was no fear in the SEAL's gaze. There was no anger. There was only a cold, clinical certainty. "I hope you have a good lawyer," Jordan said softly, "because by tomorrow you're going to need one." The Miami-Dade Police Department's airport precinct smelled like burnt filter coffee, industrial floor wax, and the stale sweat of panicked travelers. The heavy security doors slammed shut behind them, sealing off the bright, chaotic concourse and plunging them into the bleak, fluorescent-lit reality of the holding area. Officer Kevin Malone shoved Jordan Hale roughly toward the booking desk. Behind the reinforced glass sat Desk Sergeant Robert Kane, a veteran with deep bags under his eyes and a profound exhaustion that only a career in airport law enforcement could cultivate. Kane was a pragmatist. He had spent years cleaning up the messes left by hot-headed rookies and aggressive cowboys like Malone. "What do we have, Kevin?" Kane asked, his voice a raspy monotone. He didn't look up from his computer monitor immediately, his fingers clacking away at a slow, methodical pace. "Trespassing, failure to identify, and suspected forgery," Malone announced loudly, tossing Jordan's olive-drab duffel bag onto the floor and slapping the green Department of Defense Common Access card onto the steel counter. "Caught him loitering in the executive club, refused to leave. Handed me this piece of plastic when I asked for a real ID. Says he's a Navy SEAL, thinks he's special." Kane finally stopped typing. He looked at Jordan, who was standing perfectly still, his hands cuffed behind his back. The sergeant immediately noticed the suspect's posture. Most people brought in for trespassing were frantic, crying, or violently angry. Jordan was none of those things. His breathing was even, his eyes scanning the room, taking in exit sight lines and personnel with a chilling mechanical efficiency. Kane picked up the CAC card. Unlike Malone, Kane actually paid attention during interagency federal training seminars. He felt the weight of the card, ran his thumb over the embedded microchip, and angled it under the light to catch the holographic seals. He flipped it over, noting the Geneva Convention identification category printed in small font. A cold, uneasy feeling began to pull in Kane's stomach. "Take the cuffs off him, Malone," Kane ordered quietly. Malone bristled, his face flushing. "Sarge, this guy was non-compliant. I said take the cuffs off," Kane interrupted, his voice dropping an octave, carrying the unmistakable weight of rank. Now, grumbling under his breath, Malone unlocked the steel bracelets. Jordan brought his arms forward, rubbing his wrist slowly, his expression remaining completely unreadable. "Mr. Hale," Kane said, addressing Jordan with a sudden cautious respect, "I need to run this card through the federal database protocol." "Understood, Sergeant," Jordan replied. "I'd also like my phone call while you do that." "Point him to the wall phone, Kevin," Kane said, turning back to his terminal. He bypassed the standard local criminal database and logged into the secure NCIC portal, bridging his system with federal records. He typed in Jordan's DOD number. Usually a background check returned results in seconds, a clean slate or a list of priors. This time the screen buffered. A gray loading bar crawled across the monitor. Then the screen flashed a solid bright yellow. A restricted access prompt appeared, followed by bold text. Department of Defense high-level clearance restriction. Do not detain. Contact Naval Special Warfare Command immediately. Below the text was a direct 24-hour priority phone number. Kane felt the blood drain from his face. The cold unease in his stomach morphed into full-blown dread. He looked up slowly. Across the room, Jordan had bypassed the precinct's landline. Malone had carelessly left Jordan's personal cell phone sitting on the edge of the booking desk. Jordan had quietly picked it up and dialed a number. "Hey, put that down," Malone barked, lunging forward. "Malone, freeze!" Kane shouted, standing up so fast his chair crashed into the wall behind him. The sudden explosion of authority froze Malone in his tracks. Jordan held the phone to his ear. It rang twice before it was picked up in California. "Sterling?" a crisp, commanding voice answered. "Captain, it's Chief Hale," Jordan said, leaning casually against the cinderblock wall. Captain Matthew Reynolds was a senior judge advocate general, JAG officer, attached to Naval Special Warfare Command. He was a man who navigated the highest echelons of military law and possessed a reputation for utterly dismantling anyone who threatened his operators. "Hale?" Reynolds replied, a hint of surprise in his voice. "I have you pinging on terminal leave. You're supposed to be over the Midwest right now. Why are you calling me in the middle of the night?" "There's been a slight delay in Miami, sir," Jordan said, his eyes locking onto Malone's. "I'm currently detained at the airport precinct. Arresting officer is a Kevin Malone. Charges are supposedly trespassing and forgery of my federal credentials. He also illegally searched my person and seized my gear without probable cause." There was a 5-second silence on the line. When Reynolds spoke again, the residual sleep was gone from his voice, replaced by the terrifying, focused hum of a predator. "Were you physically assaulted, Chief?" "Handcuffed roughly, no permanent damage. My flight leaves soon. I'd rather not miss it." "You won't," Reynolds promised, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "Hand the phone to the ranking officer in the room. And Jordan, do not say another word. Let me do what I do." Jordan walked over to the desk and held the phone out to Sergeant Kane. "He wants to speak with you." Kane swallowed hard. He took the phone, pressing it to his ear. "This is Sergeant Kane." "Sergeant, this is Captain Matthew Reynolds, United States Navy JAG Corps." The voice on the other end was icy and precise. "You are currently holding Chief Petty Officer Jordan Hale. I am formally advising you that your department has illegally detained an active-duty Tier 1 operator returning from a classified deployment. You have exactly 5 minutes to release him, return all of his property, and clear his name from your system, or I will personally contact the Director of the FBI, the Secretary of the Navy, and the Mayor of Miami to ensure your precinct is federally audited into the Stone Age. Am I making myself clear?" Kane closed his eyes. The bureaucratic landmine hadn't just been stepped on, it had detonated. "Crystal clear, Captain. It's a misunderstanding. He's being released right now." While Sergeant Kane was frantically trying to defuse a federal catastrophe inside the precinct, a different kind of bomb was going off on the tarmac outside aboard an American Airlines flight to Chicago. Corporate Attorney Andrew Foster was comfortably seated in 2A. The heavy cabin door was still open due to a maintenance delay, which gave Andrew perfect cell reception. He pulled out his smartphone and opened the video he had recorded in the executive club. The footage was staggering in its clarity. Shot in high resolution, it captured the entire interaction. The audio was pristine, picking up the soft jazz in the background, Jordan's calm, compliant responses, and the ugly, venomous tone of Officer Malone. The moment Malone uttered the word boy, the racial hostility of the encounter was undeniably cemented. The illegal escalation, the refusal to verify the military ID, the aggressive handcuffing, it was a textbook exhibition of civil rights violations and police overreach. Andrew didn't just see an injustice, he saw an open and shut case that would yield a massive settlement. While he practiced corporate law, his former law school roommate was Benjamin Cole, one of the most ruthless and successful civil rights litigators in the state of Florida. Andrew quickly drafted an email to B. Cole, subject, immediate review, excessive force/false arrest, MIA airport. Ben, attached video happened minutes ago in the Terminal D VIP lounge. The victim is a Navy SEAL. The cop completely lost his mind. No probable cause. Pure profiling. The victim's name is Jordan Hale. Find him. This is a multi-million-dollar suit waiting to happen. Andrew. He attached the video file and hit send. But Andrew didn't stop there. He knew how the system worked. If this stayed behind closed doors, the police union would bury it. Malone would get a slap on the wrist, a few days of paid administrative leave, and the whole thing would be swept under the rug. True justice in the modern era required public leverage. Andrew created a burner account on X, formerly Twitter, and Reddit. He uploaded the unedited video with a simple factual caption. Miami Airport Police illegally arrest active-duty Navy SEAL in first-class lounge for not belonging. Officer refuses to check military ID. He tagged major news networks, military advocacy groups, and the official account of the Miami-Dade Police Department. Then he put his phone on airplane mode as the flight attendants prepared for takeoff, unaware that he had just lit a match in a room full of gasoline. Downtown in Miami, Benjamin Cole was already awake, nursing his first espresso of the day when his phone pinged. He opened Andrew's email, downloaded the video, and watched it. Then he watched it a second time. By the third viewing, a shark-like grin spread across his face. Cole immediately drafted an intent to sue and demand for preservation of evidence letter. He listed a devastating array of impending charges: violation of Fourth Amendment rights, false imprisonment, defamation, battery, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. He didn't ask for a modest sum. Cole calculated the optics. An elite black military hero violently profiled on domestic soil after defending the country abroad. He typed out the initial demand figure, $2 million. He faxed and emailed the letter directly to the Port Authority's legal department, the chief of police, and the mayor's office, legally binding them to retain all security footage, dispatch logs, and personnel files related to Kevin Malone. Simultaneously, the internet woke up. The algorithm latched onto the video like a starving animal. Within minutes, the video jumped from a handful of views to thousands. Soon after, it crossed tens of thousands. Prominent military veterans shared it, their captions burning with absolute outrage. Civil rights activists amplified it. The comment section became a raging inferno demanding Malone's badge. That morning, Marcus Delaney, the chief of police for Miami-Dade, was enjoying a quiet breakfast with his wife when his personal secure cell phone began to vibrate violently. It was a ringtone reserved only for critical emergencies. He answered. It was the mayor. "Marcus, turn on Channel 7 right now," the mayor demanded, skipping any preamble, "and tell me why the Pentagon liaison just called my office screaming about one of your officers assaulting a Navy SEAL." Delaney grabbed his TV remote and flipped to the local news station. They were playing Andrew Foster's cell phone video on a continuous loop. Delaney watched in stunned silence as Malone forcefully handcuffed the calm, compliant man. He heard the word, boy. He watched the blatant disregard for basic police procedure. Delaney had spent years trying to clean up the department's image, fighting tooth and nail to build community trust. In a few minutes, a prejudiced, arrogant officer had burned it all to the ground on national television. "Mr. Mayor, I'm handling this immediately," Delaney said, his voice deadly calm. He hung up, bypassing his chain of command, and dialed the precinct desk at the airport. Back in the holding area, Sergeant Kane had just handed Jordan his phone, his wallet, and his duffel bag. Kane was sweating profusely, apologizing repeatedly. Malone stood in the corner, his arms crossed, still looking defiant, completely oblivious to the hurricane that was currently making landfall directly on top of his career. The precinct's main phone line rang. Kane snatched it up. "Airport Precinct, Sergeant Kane." "Kane, this is Chief Delaney." The voice thundered through the receiver. "Is Officer Malone in the room with you?" Kane gulped. "Yes, Chief, he is. And the victim, Chief Petty Officer Hale. He's here, Chief. He's been uncuffed. We are releasing him." "You better pray he hasn't missed his flight," Delaney snarled. "I want you to personally escort Mr. Hale to his gate. Buy him a coffee. Carry his damn bag if you have to. When you get back, I want Malone's badge, his gun, and his radio on your desk. Tell him he is suspended without pay, effective immediately pending termination and an internal affairs investigation. And tell him he better find a hell of a lawyer." Kane slowly lowered the phone. He looked at Malone, then at Jordan. Jordan slung his heavy tactical duffel over his shoulder. He didn't look angry or vindictive. He simply looked at Malone with the same cold, clinical certainty he had shown in the lounge. "I told you," Jordan said quietly, his voice echoing in the sterile room. You were making a mistake you couldn't undo. While the internet burned with righteous indignation, Jordan Hale was finally 30,000 feet in the air, flying westward away from the humid chaos of Miami. He spent the flight staring out the window, processing the bizarre reality that after dodging mortar fire and navigating hostile territories for months, his most dangerous encounter had been a power-tripping cop in a luxury lounge. When the plane finally touched down at San Diego International Airport, Jordan was met at the baggage claim by his fiancée, Rachel Sullivan. Rachel was a high school mathematics teacher, a woman possessing a fierce intellect and a deeply compassionate heart. When she saw Jordan walking toward her, she sprinted past the waiting crowds and threw her arms around his neck, burying her face in his shoulder. "I saw the news," Rachel whispered, her voice tight with a mixture of immense relief and simmering anger. "It's everywhere, Jordan. My phone hasn't stopped ringing. Are you okay? Did he hurt you?" Jordan wrapped his arms around her, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. For the first time in months, the tension in his shoulders completely dissolved. "I'm fine, Rachel. Just a bruised wrist and a delayed flight. It's over." But it wasn't over. In fact, the war was just beginning. Back in Florida, the Miami-Dade Police Benevolent Association, the powerful union representing airport officers, was shifting into damage control mode. Thomas Reed, the aggressive, red-faced president of the union, knew that letting Malone swing in the wind would set a dangerous precedent for his other officers. That afternoon, Reed called a hastily organized press conference on the steps of the municipal courthouse. Microphones from local and national affiliates were shoved into Reed's face. He adjusted his suit and put on his best grim, authoritative expression. "The video circulating online only shows a fraction of the interaction," Reed lied smoothly, looking directly into the cameras. "Officer Malone is a decorated veteran who is conducting a standard security protocol in a highly sensitive transit hub. Mr. Hale, while we respect his military service, was uncooperative and exhibited behaviors consistent with combat-related stress. He refused to immediately produce physical identification, creating a suspicious environment that forced Officer Malone to secure the scene for the safety of other passengers. We fully support our officer and urge the public to wait for the complete internal investigation before rushing to judgment." It was a classic ruthless smear tactic. Blame the victim, hint at PTSD to make the military veteran look unstable, and hide behind the vague shield of airport security. But Reed had fatally underestimated the adversaries he had just provoked. Hours after the press conference aired, Benjamin Cole sat in his expansive corner office overlooking Biscayne Bay. His phone buzzed. It was Captain Matthew Reynolds, the Navy JAG officer. "Mr. Cole, I understand you are representing Chief Hale in his civil capacity," Reynolds said, his voice crisp and strictly professional over the encrypted line. "I am, Captain," Cole replied, leaning back in his leather chair. "And I assume you caught the Union rep's little performance on Channel 7. "I did. And the Department of the Navy does not take kindly to a local union boss, implying our active-duty Tier 1 operators are mentally unstable liabilities," Reynolds stated. The cold fury in the JAG officer's tone was unmistakable. "Chief Hale's medical and psychological evaluations are classified, but I can assure you he is cleared for the highest level of global operations. He does not suffer from PTSD, and he certainly wasn't a threat in a breakfast lounge. I figured as much." Cole smiled. "I'm drafting the formal complaint now. False arrest, battery, defamation, the whole kitchen sink. But I need leverage, Captain. The city is going to try to stall, claim qualified immunity, and drag this through the mud." "Let me help you with that," Reynolds offered smoothly. "While the DOD cannot formally intervene in your civil suit, I do have friends in the Department of Justice who take a very keen interest in civil rights violations under the color of law. You might want to submit a Freedom of Information Act request regarding Officer Malone's internal affairs history. Specifically, ask for the sealed complaints from previous years. You'll find exactly what you need." Cole's eyes lit up. "Captain Reynolds, it is an absolute pleasure doing business with you." Soon after, Cole had utilized every aggressive legal tool at his disposal. He bypassed the standard channels and filed an emergency motion for discovery, attaching a subpoena for Malone's complete employment file. The city attorneys, panicking under the intense national spotlight and terrified of a federal DOJ probe, caved immediately. When Cole opened the sealed files, he hit the absolute jackpot. Kevin Malone wasn't a decorated veteran making a one-time mistake. He was a serial abuser of power. The files revealed multiple separate incidents where Malone had unlawfully detained, harassed, or used excessive force against minority travelers. In one case, he had tackled a Hispanic college student who was simply running to catch a flight. In another, he had aggressively detained a black corporate executive over a suspiciously large piece of luggage. Every single time the victims had filed complaints, every single time the union had successfully lobbied the precinct captain to classify the complaints as unsubstantiated, burying the evidence in locked filing cabinets to protect their own. But this time, Malone had picked on a man whose composure was unbreakable, whose background was unassailable, and whose legal backing was a relentless combination of elite civilian litigation and federal military might. Cole filed the official civil lawsuit in the United States District Court for the Southern District of Florida. The demand had evolved. Due to the union's defamatory press conference, Cole amended the damages. He was no longer asking for $2 million. He was demanding $4.5 million. And he was naming not just Officer Malone, but the city of Miami and the police chief for gross negligence in their retention of a known bad actor. The legal term is deposition. To a layman, it is simply an interview under oath. But to a master litigator like Benjamin Cole, a deposition is a surgical theater and the witness is the patient on the table, wide awake and completely stripped of their defenses. Months after the incident at the airport, the media furor had dialed down to a steady simmer. But behind closed doors, the legal battle was reaching its boiling point. The city of Miami had initially tried to make the problem go away quickly. They offered Cole a settlement of a few $100,000, provided Jordan signed a strict non-disclosure agreement, and Malone was allowed to quietly resign with his pension intact. Cole had laughed the city attorneys out of his conference room. "My client spent his entire adult life defending the Constitution," Cole had told them. "He's not going to sign away his First Amendment rights to protect a racist bully's retirement fund. We'll see you in depositions." It was a rainy Tuesday morning when Kevin Malone finally walked into the conference room of Cole's downtown law firm. Malone looked remarkably different from the arrogant, aggressive officer who had swaggered through the VIP lounge. He had lost weight. His suit hung loosely on his frame. The suspension without pay had drained his savings, and the constant stress of the looming federal lawsuit had carved deep, haggard lines into his face. Beside him sat Philip Grant, a weary, overworked attorney provided by the police union. At the head of the long mahogany table sat Benjamin Cole, flanked by two junior associates. A court reporter sat silently in the corner, fingers poised over her stenograph machine. "State your name for the record," Cole began, his voice calm, polite, and terrifyingly casual. "Kevin Edward Malone," Malone muttered, staring at his hands. For the first 2 hours, Cole asked mundane, foundational questions. He established Malone's training, his understanding of airport protocols, and his knowledge of the Fourth Amendment. He lulled Malone into a false sense of security, making him feel like this was just a standard administrative review. Grant, the union lawyer, relaxed his posture, thinking Cole was just going through the motions. Then Cole clicked a button on a remote control. A large, flat-screen TV mounted on the wall flickered to life, displaying a paused frame of the viral cell phone video. "Mr. Malone, let's talk about the morning at the airport," Cole said, his tone sharpening ever so slightly. "You testified earlier that you approached my client, Jordan Hale, because you suspected he was trespassing. What specific articulable facts led you to that suspicion?" Malone cleared his throat. "He was wearing a hoodie and jeans. He didn't look like a typical first-class passenger. I had reasonable suspicion." "Reasonable suspicion based on a hoodie?" Cole raised an eyebrow. He pulled a thick binder from his briefcase and slid a photograph across the table. It was a still frame from the airport's own security cameras, time-stamped about 10 minutes before the incident. It showed a white male in his early 20s wearing sweatpants and a backwards baseball cap sleeping soundly in a chair just 2 tables away from where Jordan had been sitting. "Can you identify the individual in this photograph, Mr. Malone?" "No," Malone mumbled. "His name is Tyler Grant," Cole stated. "He is the son of a prominent Miami real estate developer. He was flying first class. He's wearing sweatpants. You walked past him twice before confronting my client. Did you ask Mr. Grant for his identification?" Malone shifted uncomfortably in the leather chair. "I don't recall." "You don't recall?" Cole repeated softly. "Let's move on. When my client presented his boarding pass and his valid federally issued Department of Defense identification card, Why did you refuse to accept it? Fake IDs are common, Malone deflected defensively. I thought it was forged. He was being uncooperative. He was giving me an attitude. Cole leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. The trap was set. Now it was time to spring it. Mr. Malone, isn't it true that in a previous incident you detained a Hispanic student named Miguel Santos for hours claiming his Florida driver's license was forged because you thought he looked like a gang member? Grant bolted upright. Objection. This is entirely irrelevant to the current. It goes directly to pattern and practice, Philip, Cole snapped back, his voice cracking like a whip. You can answer the question, Mr. Malone. Malone swallowed hard, a bead of sweat tracing down his temple. There was an incident. The department cleared me. They cleared you. Cole nodded slowly. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out another document. Let me read you an email, Mr. Malone. This is from an internal server dated a few days after you detained my client. You sent this to another officer in your precinct. Cole held up the paper and read loudly, ensuring the court reporter caught every syllable. Got caught on camera dealing with one of those entitled thugs in the VIP lounge. Union says they'll bury it like the others, but the brass is panicking because he turned out to be military. Nothing's going to happen. They always back down when we drag out the paperwork. The silence in the room was absolute, deafening and suffocating. The air seemed to get sucked out of the room. Malone stared at the document in Cole's hand, his face draining of all color, looking like a man who had just watched his own execution order being signed. Grant, the union lawyer, slowly put his pen down. He looked at his client with a mixture of absolute disgust and professional despair. An email like that didn't just prove excessive force, it proved premeditated malice. It proved a conspiracy to cover up civil rights violations. Mr. Malone, Cole said, his voice dropping to a near whisper that somehow commanded the entire room. My client has fought in war zones you couldn't even point to on a map. He has bled for this country. And you looked at him, judged the color of his skin and the clothes on his back, and decided to treat him like an animal. You thought the system would protect you just like it always had. Cole closed the thick binder with a heavy final thud. We are done here for today, Cole announced, standing up and buttoning his suit jacket. He looked down at the ruined, trembling police officer. Mr. Grant, I suggest you advise your client to start liquidating his assets because I'm not just going to take his badge. I'm going to take his house, his pension, and every dime he ever earns for the rest of his life. Shortly after the devastating deposition, panic consumed the highest levels of Miami's municipal government. Inside the mayor's heavily soundproofed conference room, Police Chief Marcus Delaney sat completely motionless, staring at the printed transcript of Kevin Malone's testimony. Across the expansive mahogany table, the city's lead litigator, a sharply dressed man named Stephen Park, was aggressively rubbing his temples. We cannot let this go to a federal jury, Stephen Park stated, his voice laced with absolute panic as he paced the length of the room. Cole didn't just expose Malone, he exposed the precinct's systemic failure to discipline a rogue officer. If those previous incident files are read into the public court record during a trial, the Department of Justice will place this city under a federal consent decree. We will lose control of our own police force. Our budget will be gutted and every single one of us in this room will be subpoenaed by Congress. Delaney closed the transcript folder. He had dedicated his life to law enforcement, and the stain Malone had left on his badge made him physically sick. The chief stood up, smoothing his uniform jacket. Give Cole whatever he wants, every single dime. But I want Malone gone. No pension, no administrative reassignment, no quiet resignation. He is fired for gross misconduct, and I want it done before the evening news broadcast. The fall of Kevin Malone was swift, merciless, and absolutely absolute. Karma rarely knocks politely. When it arrived for Malone, it kicked the front door off its hinges. Later that afternoon, Delaney ordered Malone into the precinct squad room. In front of his peers, Delaney publicly demanded Malone's badge and service weapon. The silence in the room was absolute as the disgraced officer unbuckled his gun belt, his hands shaking violently. No one offered a word of support. No one patted him on the back. He walked out of the double doors, a civilian entirely disgraced. The police union, which had loudly defended him on national television just months prior, suddenly went completely silent. Thomas Reed, the union president, recognized that defending a man who documented his own racially motivated malice in writing was a political death sentence. When Malone called Reed, begging for continued legal support, his calls went straight to voicemail. Grant, the union-appointed lawyer, formally withdrew from the case the very next morning, citing an irreconcilable conflict of interest. Stripped of his legal shield, Malone faced the full, terrifying weight of the legal system alone. The city formally terminated his employment that week because he was fired for severe misconduct involving civil rights violations. His municipal pension, a nest egg he had spent years building, was permanently frozen and subsequently revoked by the state retirement board. Furthermore, the district attorney, eager to score political points, opened a criminal probe into Malone's past arrests. But the financial bleeding didn't stop there. Cole's ruthless legal maneuvering ensured that Malone was held personally liable in the civil suit. To cover the mounting debts and the exorbitant retainers of private defense attorneys desperate enough to keep him out of federal prison, Malone was forced to liquidate everything. He sold his beloved fishing boat at a massive loss. He drained his retirement savings accounts, paying massive early withdrawal penalties. Eventually, the bank foreclosed on his home in a Miami suburb, forcing him to move into a cramped, dilapidated apartment on the outskirts of the city. He went from wielding unchecked authority over innocent citizens to stocking shelves on the night shift at a local hardware store, forever branded by the viral video that permanently destroyed his reputation and his livelihood. Meanwhile, across the country in sunny San Diego, Jordan Hale was sitting on the back porch of his home watching the sunset over the Pacific Ocean. Rachel sat beside him, her head resting gently on his shoulder, flipping through a magazine. His phone vibrated on the patio table. It was Benjamin Cole. "Chief Hale," Cole said, his voice carrying a rare, genuine warmth that he usually reserved for his own family. "I have the finalized paperwork in my hand. The city caved completely." Jordan took a slow sip of his black coffee, his expression remaining as stoic as ever. "What are the terms, counselor?" $4.5 million paid in full promptly," Cole announced, unable to hide the triumphant smile in his voice. "But I know you don't just care about the money. We secured the structural changes you demanded. Kevin Malone has been officially terminated for cause and stripped of his law enforcement certification. He can never be a cop anywhere in the United States ever again. Furthermore, the city has agreed to mandatory federal oversight and mandatory de-escalation and implicit bias training for the entire airport precinct, overseen by an independent civilian board. They are cleaning house." A quiet, profound sense of closure washed over Jordan. The battle had never been about securing a massive payday. It had always been about ensuring that no other innocent traveler would ever have to face the humiliation and danger that he had endured in that lounge. He had fought for the Miguel Santos and the black executives who hadn't had a brilliant lawyer or a viral video to save them. "You did incredible work, Ben," Jordan replied quietly. "Thank you for holding the line. It was the honor of my career, Jordan. Enjoy your retirement. You've earned every bit of it." When the settlement money finally cleared, Jordan didn't buy a fleet of sports cars or a massive mansion. True to the quiet, disciplined ethos of the Navy SEALs, he chose to build something lasting. He secured his family's future, ensuring Rachel's student loans were completely erased. And then he took the majority of the funds and established the Vanguard Initiative. The nonprofit foundation was specifically designed to provide elite legal representation and transition assistance to minority military veterans who face discrimination or legal hurdles upon returning to civilian life. He hired a team of aggressive young civil rights attorneys fully funded by the settlement to ensure no veteran fought the system alone. The man who was told he didn't belong in an airport lounge ended up owning his narrative, dismantling a corrupt system and building a fortress for others. He turned a moment of profound indignity into a legacy of empowerment. And Kevin Malone, he was left to spend the rest of his days serving customers who occasionally recognized him from the internet. A broken, bitter man who finally learned that the uniform does not make you untouchable, and that unchecked arrogance always comes with a devastating price. Justice in the real world isn't always immediate, but when it finally arrives, it hits with the absolute force of a freight train. Jordan Hale's story is a powerful reminder that true strength isn't about raising your voice or throwing a punch when provoked. It is about maintaining absolute discipline and letting your adversaries defeat themselves through their own blind arrogance. A corrupt officer thought he had found an easy target to bully, but he ended up kicking a hornet's nest of military precision and devastating legal accountability. What did you think of Jordan's incredibly calm response under intense pressure? Would you have been able to keep your cool in that airport lounge, or would you have lost it? Drop your thoughts in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this satisfying story of real-life karma and ultimate justice, make sure to smash that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more gripping stories just like this one. Jordan Hale's story offers one of the most moving life lessons we can carry. Real strength is found in composure and integrity when injustice tries to shatter your peace. After months of risking his life in classified combat zones for his country, Jordan came home exhausted and simply wanted to rest in an airport lounge. Instead, he was wrongly targeted by a prejudiced officer who judged him by appearance alone. The officer's arrogance led to an illegal arrest and public humiliation. Yet Jordan refused to let anger take over. He stayed calm and dignified, letting his quiet strength expose the truth. That choice revealed years of abuse, led to a landmark lawsuit delivering justice, ended the officer's career, and created reforms to protect others. This emotional journey shows that prejudice and bullying may seem powerful, but they ultimately destroy those who wield them. When we choose discipline over reaction, we turn personal pain into purpose that changes lives. Jordan's calm courage built a foundation to help other veterans facing discrimination. It reminds us that our greatest power is staying true to who we are, no matter the provocation. If this story touched your heart, what would you have done in Jordan's place? Share your honest thoughts in the comments below. If you believe in justice and inner strength, like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel for more stories of real karma and valuable life lessons. Your support means the world. Thank you for joining me on this journey.